And once again, it all comes out how toxic the atmosphere was yesterday. That the biggest success yesterday was not holding a press conference and simply not explaining anything to people anymore, hiding from them how bad the situation really was there yesterday. That's now being sold as a success. And many people ask me, how do you actually know all this information all the time? Among other things from the Bundestag. And that's exactly what I'm going to do today. Well, let's just say I'll share some information about that. For example, why I knew the number of votes that didn't elect this chancellor in the first round, and how I knew exactly that it would go to a second round. How someone like Friedrich Merz, for example, becomes chancellor, and why I still believe that new elections won't come until January. So stay tuned. Make sure to watch this video all the way to the end this time if you want to know who keeps leaking information to me. And if you want to support me, I would really appreciate a like and a subscription.
There's unrest among the people, unrest in companies and in the economy, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about now.
Unrest, and above all, unrest in this government. Anyone who followed the news yesterday knows one thing: nothing at all has changed since yesterday. All they have now is a roadmap, basically something like a coalition agreement that they've now agreed to work together. Just like, for example, during the exploratory talks when Friedrich Merz wasn't even chancellor yet, they didn't come up with anything more. Basically, just that there should be reforms to placate the public a bit. But these are not supposed to come before the elections in Saxony-Anhalt, because honestly, they don't want to burden people with these reforms anymore. They would rather be willing to pay off higher debts for a few years, so that at some point the debts, which now make up the largest part of the budget, will be reduced. They would rather be willing to misuse the money, meaning this extra debt that has been taken on. No, that's not a special fund. It's purely and simply debt that is now being added to the budget so that it's no longer shown to the citizens. We are absolutely divided. We have nothing in common anymore. And actually, this government is basically finished. But we're afraid of the people. We're afraid especially of the elections. And that's why we'd rather run this country into the ground.
You're right to stress. It's supposed to exist. This government has always been very good at making announcements, but unfortunately not at actually implementing what it announces.
I know the big problem of just making announcements, and I'll just take a perfect example here to illustrate the whole thing. I made a video, I think about 2 years ago in the summer, where I said Olaf Scholz will resign in 48 hours. Nothing happened. Then, a short time later, the traffic light coalition broke up, I think 4 or 5 months roughly later. And then, yes, after the coalition broke up, back then, a man named Buschmann stood up and said, yes, 5 months ago, Olaf Scholz should have already called for a vote of confidence. For example, if I go ahead and share some information, yes, I'll explain later where I got it from, then it's usually like this. I get the information and I assume that they're telling me the truth. For example, Olaf Scholz has called for a vote of confidence. I have an opinion channel, which means I only share my opinion. But the fact is, this government is not an opinion channel, but rather it's supposed to hold the country together. The fact is also, while I express my opinion, Friedrich Merz should refrain from doing so. And that's for a certain reason, because he creates uncertainty among the public, because he scares off his own voters. And that's also the point. That's exactly what the SPD wants now, that he basically just keeps quiet and lets the SPD do their thing. But these two are now so far apart that they can't find any common ground anymore.
And for that, I think yesterday's summit was important, first of all, to clear the air. The tone of the last few weeks has bothered many people. Many yes fronts.
And there's a wrong assumption here. The day, and those are just the pieces of information I'm getting, and yes, give me a few more minutes. The day before yesterday wasn't about getting closer, but about getting a new schedule. What I said at the beginning, we don't give There was, I think, no press statement at all until today. Actually, you could go ahead and say, I can also fire the spokesperson of the Federal Chancellery, and there won't be any more press conferences for the press. Why even bother? We don't need them anymore. And here we are at a point where things, or where the situation gets a bit tricky. This government can no longer agree on structural reforms. In fact, they can't even govern together anymore. We saw that at the DGB. The two sides are so deeply entrenched that what the SPD is demanding now, the CDU can no longer implement. Otherwise, they would lose their base. Otherwise, the CDU will be destroyed. And any demand from the CDU, the SPD can no longer implement. Why? Because otherwise they would lose even more voters. So you can already tell you can't even find common ground in the center anymore, because for both parties it would mean losing even more votes. Now, the only way to increase their percentage without generating more votes would be, for example, to ban the AfD. Now, there's someone like Dobrindt who says that's impossible. Die stehen nun mal mit den. They are firmly grounded in the Constitution. They want public consultations. Yes, there are some statements. I personally think so too. They're just against it. My core values, but still I have the most in common with the AfD, around 83 to 86%, while I completely reject some things. But I don't have more in common with any other party. And yes, there is party discipline. We don't even need to talk about it. That's just how it is here in Germany. Only when it goes against your rules, only when it goes absolutely against everything you stand for. Like, for example, the people from start to finish, to lie to them, then you have to leave that party, then you don't belong there. So if my goal, for example, were to lie to the citizens from morning till night, to cover them with untruths, and at the same time break all my promises, yes, then I would be in the wrong party and should rather go to the CDU.
That's why it's crucial as we're facing a complex crisis. Unlike with Gerd Schröder, who faced a labor market problem and responded with a labor market reform, it's different now.
And for example, if anyone now thinks that I would tell them in such a complex crisis as we have, that, for example, CDU members would voluntarily leak information to me. Man, Sasha provides me with new information every day about what things are really like there, because she wants a center-right coalition. Of course, that person is mistaken. And no, we all know Saskia Esken is definitely the last person who would give me information. But it's someone I, for example, went to school with. It's someone I was in the same places back then. And here we are at a point where, unfortunately, I have to tell you, of course, I won't mention any names here, because at the latest then, this position would be absolutely compromised. But let me briefly highlight this person's expertise again. This person says our crisis is self-inflicted. This person told me, for example, that there will be at least 16 dissenting votes for the chancellor in the first round of voting, and he will be elected in the second round. I published that 2 or 3 days before the chancellor election, so I couldn't have known the whole thing. He tipped me off that Olaf Scholz would call for a vote of confidence and had already prepared for it. Shortly after, it came out that the D-Day paper had already been written. This person also explained so much more to me, like, for example, the thing that caused such a huge stir everywhere back then. On Wednesday, the state of defense will be discussed in the Bundestag. That got so much media attention because so many alternative media outlets picked it up. I'm not the only one who gets this information. Others do too. Then, very quickly and very quietly, it was removed from the agenda again. If you want to see traces of it, just watch the video and then the following session. Specifically what Julia Klockner said about which agenda items were added and then immediately removed again. If you want to know how or where I get a lot of information, just check out the channel down below. There are a lot of stock market videos, there are a lot of training videos, and there are some videos from members of the Bundestag who, of course, provide me with information. However, if you were hoping that I would give you every single name, then I have to disappoint you. but you'll find what you're looking for if you do your research properly. With that in mind, I wish you a wonderful Father's Day. I'm moving into my new office now, and I hope you have a wonderful, peaceful Father's Day today.